Picture the Sahara, an ocean of sand, wind like a whispering kiln, horizons that shimmer and blur. Now, flip the picture. Imagine hippos wallowing in broad rivers, fisherfolk mending nets under acacia shade, herds of cattle moving between lakes so wide you could sail for days and still not see the far shore. Imagine stone villages perched on escarpments, carved grindstones, pottery ovens, and star watchers marking seasons in megalithic circles. This isn't fantasy. For thousands of years, the Sahara was green, alive with people, animals, and water. Then, the climate shifted. The grasslands dried, rivers retreated, cities, farms, and graveyards vanished under sand and silence. What exactly was the lost civilization beneath the Sahara? Was it one empire or many cultures? How do we know it was there? And where did the people go when the desert returned? Today, satellites, archaeology, lake cores, and ancient art are telling the story, layer by layer. When the desert wasn't. The Sahara hasn't always been the world's harshest desert. Earth's orbit tilts and wobbles just enough to change the way sunlight hits the planet. Over thousands of years, those shifts have altered the monsoons. When summer sunlight heats North Africa more strongly, rains push farther north, greening the Sahara. This cycle gave rise to what scientists call the African Humid period, lasting from about 14,800 years ago until roughly 5,000 years ago. During those millennia, the desert wasn't empty. It was full of rivers, wetlands, and grasslands. Satellite radar has even traced the ghost of a massive river system, the Tamanrasset, that once flowed across the western Sahara to the Atlantic. Researchers believe it may have rivaled the Niger or even the Nile in size during peak wet periods. In today's barren landscapes, you can still see channels and valleys carved by water that hasn't flowed for thousands of years. Lakes grew to staggering scales. Lake Megachad, once stretching across parts of Niger, Nigeria, and Chad, may have covered up to 400,000 square kilometers, about the size of modern Germany. At its deepest, it reached 160 meters. From orbit, you can still see stranded beaches circling the desert where its shoreline once lay. Imagine fishing villages spread across these coasts, canoes pulling up with nets, and families trading dried fish far into the hinterlands. The proof isn't just geological, it's also human. At Gobero in Niger, archaeologists found a cemetery with nearly 200 burials, showing two waves of settlement, an early fishing community living off abundant lakes, and a later pastoral group who herded cattle as conditions shifted. Skeletons were buried with ornaments of beads, harpoons, and pottery decorated with dotted patterns. Children, families, and elders were laid to rest together, evidence of stable, long-lived communities rather than brief camps. On Sahara's eastern flank, Nabta Playa in Egypt became a seasonal gathering place around a playa lake. People built stone alignments, sometimes called a calendar circle, that tracked solstices. This wasn't random piling of rocks. It shows organized knowledge of astronomy tied to survival. Knowing when the rains would arrive could mean the difference between abundance and hunger. And then there's the rock art. Across the Acacius Mountains of Libya and Tassili Najir in Algeria, thousands of paintings and carvings show animals, elephants, giraffes, crocodiles, that no longer roam the Sahara. They also depict human life, including hunters with bows, women dancing, herders with cattle, and even chariots in later times. These are snapshots of shifting lifestyles across centuries, painted like a time-lapse diary. But the climate's generosity was temporary. Around 6,000 years ago, monsoon rains weakened. By 5,000 years ago, lakes shrank, dunes advanced, and the Sahara began drying into the form we know today. The lost civilization wasn't a single kingdom swallowed whole. It was many cultures across a vast green belt, each adjusting to water's rise and fall. Some innovated, others migrated, but none escaped the slow tightening grip of desertification. Life in the green Sahara. What was it like to live in a Sahara that was green and alive? Along rivers and lakes, daily routines centered on fishing. Gobero's harpoons and fish bones show communities catching massive Nile perch and catfish. Families smoked or dried fish to preserve food for dry months. Pottery shards reveal traces of recipes, cooking fish stews and storing grain. Over time, herding replaced fishing as the main livelihood. Rock art vividly depicts cattle in herds, people milking cows, and rituals involving livestock. These weren't just random drawings. They reflect how societies became structured around mobility, rain patterns, and grazing routes. Cattle were wealth, food, and a sacred bond. Some communities settled more permanently. In Mauritania's Dartichit and Walata regions, beginning around 2000 BC, people built stone towns on rocky escarpments. Archaeologists have documented more than 500 sites, complete with walls, storage areas, and corrals. These weren't temporary camps. They were organized villages with alleyways and terrace fields. Residents grew pearl millet, one of the earliest known examples of grain farming in West Africa. With livestock, crops, and architecture, Dartichit was a remarkable early urban experiment on the desert's edge. Farther east, Nabta Playa became a hub of seasonal gatherings. Herding groups moved in during the rainy months, built hearths, shared rituals, and aligned stones to mark celestial events. It's one of the earliest known examples of astronomical planning in Africa, linking survival directly to the skies. The Garamantes of Libya's Fezzan region took a different route. From around 500 BC, they engineered faggaras, underground channels that tapped ancient aquifers. These tunnels, some stretching kilometers, delivered water to date orchards and fields. At their peak, they supported a capital at Garama and dozens of fortified towns. Classical writers describe them as fierce warriors with chariots, but archaeology shows them as equally skilled farmers, builders, and traders. Satellite surveys in 2011 revealed more than 100 previously unmapped Garamantian sites, confirming a sophisticated oasis civilization hidden under sand. Population size varied across the Sahara. At Gobero, 200 burials reflect a large community tied to a paleo lake. Dartichit's hundreds of settlements imply thousands of inhabitants spread across a broad landscape. Mega Lake Chad's fisheries could have supported tens of thousands along its shores. Food and knowledge systems were diverse. In wetter regions, fish dominated diets. In drier areas, grains and herding took precedence. Knowledge of when and where to move was crucial. Oral traditions, rock art, and even early star calendars helped families predict shifts in rainfall. Life in the Green Sahara was not marginal, it was vibrant. People fished, herded, farmed, built stone houses, and engineered water systems. They adapted to a dynamic environment and left behind a tapestry of cultural footprints. And when aridity returned, those skills, terrace farming, star tracking, water engineering, were carried south into the Sahel and east into the Nile Valley. Science, evidence, and theories. How do we know about this lost world beneath the Sahara? The evidence comes from many directions. Climate science provides the big frame. Marine sediments, lake cores, and wind-blown dust all show wet-dry cycles linked to orbital changes. The African humid period is clear in the data. Monsoon rains advanced northward, then retreated around 5,000 years ago. Geography gives us mega lakes and rivers. Lake Mega Chad's former shorelines are visible from space, confirming its peak area of about 340,000 to 400,000 square kilometers. Radar mapping has traced the Tamanrasset River, a giant channel buried beneath dunes, which once drained across the desert into the Atlantic. These were not small features. They rivaled major modern river systems. Archaeology gives human stories. Gobero's burials show fisher-foragers giving way to pastoralists. Dartichit's stone towns reveal agriculture and permanent settlement. Nabta Playa's stone circles show astronomy and organized gatherings. And the Garamantes left a network of faggaras, forts, and oases, proving a true desert state. Migration completes the picture. As the Sahara dried, populations concentrated along rivers like the Nile or moved into the Sahel, where rainfall was more dependable. This movement likely influenced the growth of early Egypt and later Western African societies. Popular theories swirl around the Sahara. Some imagine a single super-civilization lost like Atlantis. But the evidence doesn't support one empire stretching across the desert. Instead, it points to many distinct societies shaped by climate and geography. Another theory centers on the Eye of the Sahara, or Richet structure in Mauritania. Some fringe thinkers claim it's Atlantis. Geologists disagree. It's a natural eroded dome of rock, about 40 kilometers wide, with no evidence of urban remains. It's stunning geology, not a city. By contrast, the Garamantes are a genuine forgotten civilization. For centuries, they were known only from Roman texts. But modern archaeology and satellite imaging prove they built a thriving oasis state. Did Saharan people simply become Egyptians? The answer is more complex. Many groups migrated into the Nile, adding cultural strands, but Egyptian civilization also developed its own deep local traditions. The Sahara was one contributor, not the sole source. The mainstream view is clear. The Sahara wasn't home to one lost empire, but to a mosaic of cultures that flourished when the desert was green and then adapted when it turned back to sand. Where did they go? So what happened to the people of the Green Sahara? The short answer, they adapted, shifted, and carried their knowledge elsewhere. As rainfall declined after 6,000 years ago, lakes evaporated and rivers dried. Grasslands shrank. At Wadi Hawar, once a thriving Nile tributary, archaeological surveys show sites abandoned as dunes advanced. Families could no longer sustain herds or farms there. Many people turned to mobility. Herders stretched migration routes longer each year, digging shallow wells as water grew scarce. But eventually, even mobility had limits. That's when migration took on larger scales. The Nile Valley became a major refuge. Even though its floods were changing, it still provided dependable fish and fertile soil. Archaeological evidence shows population growth along the Nile during this transition, likely including groups arriving from the desert. These shifts may have influenced the development of pre-dynastic Egypt and its farming economy. To the west, communities at Dar Tichet adapted with stone villages, terrace farming, and millet cultivation. These towns show careful water budgeting and cooperation at the desert's edge. Over time, as conditions worsened, many dispersed southward. Archaeologists argue that cultural strands from Dar Tichet fed into the later Soninke people, builders of the Ghana Empire. In Libya's Fezzan, the Garamantes responded differently. They doubled down, tapping fossil aquifers with phosphorus. For centuries, they thrived, turning oases into breadbaskets. They connected caravan trade from the Mediterranean to sub-Saharan Africa, trading salt, slaves, and goods. At their peak, Garama, in its hinterland, supported tens of thousands of people. But fossil water cannot be replaced. Over-extraction and shifting trade eventually collapsed their system by late antiquity. Their towns crumbled into the sand. So the Green Sahara didn't vanish, its people shifted. Some became farmers on the Nile, others became Sahelian herders and millet growers. Some clung to desert oases. Their settlements were buried, but their traditions carried on in agriculture, herding, astronomy, and water engineering. Today, researchers continue to map their legacy. Satellite radar finds buried rivers. Isotope chemistry tracks ancient waters. Archaeologists uncover cemeteries, rock art, and ruins. Slowly, the Sahara's secret is returning. Not a single Atlantis, but many civilizations resilient in the face of climate change. Conclusion. Beneath the Sahara's dunes lies no single Atlantis, but a web of lives and lifeways. Fishers on inland seas, herders tracing green corridors, stone-walled towns balancing grain and goats, and oasis cities tunneling for water. The proof is solid. Paleo lakes mapped from orbit, giant buried rivers, cemeteries, and towns dated layer by layer, and rock art that paints climate into culture. Mega Chad once covered about 340,000 to 400,000 square kilometers. The Tamanrasset River drained a basin the size of a continental giant. Gobero alone holds about 200 burials across 2 wet phases. Then the monsoon withdrew, and people chose ingenuity or new homelands, from the Nile to the Sahel to enduring oases. So where did the civilization go? It didn't vanish. It adapted, moved, and transformed. The Green Sahara became sand again, but its people remained, carrying forward skills, symbols, and stories. In that sense, the lost civilization isn't lost. It's just not where we expected to find it. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about Africa's ancient history, check out our book, Ancient African Kingdoms, a captivating guide to civilizations of ancient Africa such as the land of Punt, Carthage, the Kingdom of Axum, the Mali Empire, and the Kingdom of Kush. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.